Welcome back, my fellow night owls, to another chilling episode. Tonight we delve into the eerie world of mysterious calls from unknown sources in isolated places. Imagine yourself alone, miles from civilization, the silence broken only by the crackling of a fire or the hum of your car engine. Then your phone rings, but it's not someone you know. Prepare yourself for 3 spine-tingling tales that will make you question every call you receive in the dead of night. Deep within a secluded forest, nestled amongst towering pines and shrouded in an eerie silence, stood an abandoned cabin. Its wooden walls, weathered by years of harsh winters and scorching summers, were a testament to its isolation. This was the destination of our first unsettling tale. A young woman named Anya, seeking respite from the city's clamor, decided to spend a week in this secluded cabin. Armed with her backpack and a handful of books, she crossed the threshold into the cabin's dusty interior. The silence was almost deafening. The first day passed without incident. Anya busied herself with unpacking and exploring the surroundings. As dusk painted the sky, she settled down with a book and a mug of hot cocoa. That's when the phone rang. The cabin had no landline, and Anya had almost forgotten about her cell phone, the signal lost miles back. She stared at the unknown number flashing on the screen, a shiver crawling up her spine. Hesitantly, she answered, "Hello?" Silence, just the crackling static of a bad connection. Anya dismissed it as a prank call, but a seed of unease had been planted. The next evening, as shadows stretched across the cabin floor, the phone rang again. Same unknown number, same chilling silence on the other end. Anya's grip tightened on the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. Fear, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of her calm. The calls continued each night, always around the same time, always shrouded in the same unnerving silence. Anya tried everything, ignoring the calls, turning off her phone, even removing the battery. Nothing worked. The calls persisted as if an unseen entity was toying with her. Each ring chipped away at Anya's composure, amplifying the isolation she felt. The once peaceful solitude of the cabin transformed into an oppressive silence, thick with unseen menace. She began to see shadows flicker at the edge of her vision, hear whispers in the rustling leaves outside. One particularly harrowing night, the phone rang yet again. Anya hesitated, her finger hovering over the answer button. She knew it was irrational, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, terribly wrong. Then a voice, barely a whisper, broke through the static. It wasn't clear, but Anya could have sworn it uttered a single bone-chilling word: leave. Panic seized her. Anya didn't wait for another word. She threw her belongings into her backpack, her hands shaking so badly she could barely zip the bag. Fumbling in the dark, she raced out of the cabin, not daring to look back. The drive back to civilization was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Even with each mile that separated her from the cabin, Anya couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching her, the echo of the whisper clinging to her like a ghostly touch. Anya never returned to the cabin, haunted by the memory of the silent calls and the chilling voice that urged her to flee. The experience left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying calls are the ones where no one speaks, yet something, or someone, is undoubtedly listening. Our next tale takes us to the vast, desolate expanse of the Nevada desert, where a lone truck driver named Jack found himself facing a different kind of chilling call. The setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the seemingly endless ribbon of asphalt, and the only sound was the low hum of his engine. Jack was used to the solitude of long-haul trucking, the miles blurring by under the cover of darkness. He found a strange comfort in the quiet companionship of the open road, his thoughts his only company. But tonight something felt different, the silence heavier, more oppressive. As the sky deepened to a velvety black, pinpricked with a million stars, Jack's CB radio crackled to life. Static, then a voice, distorted and faint, asking for help. The voice mentioned an accident, a car overturned a few miles back. Jack, a man with a kind heart and a strong sense of duty, didn't hesitate. He radioed back, assuring the voice that help was on the way. He noted the mile marker, his unease growing with each passing mile. The voice hadn't given a name or a specific location, only a vague description of the accident. Miles stretched into an unsettling silence. No overturned car, no sign of an accident. Jack tried the radio again, but all he heard was static. Just as he was about to dismiss it as a prank, his cell phone rang, an unknown number. He answered, his gut twisting with a sense of foreboding. Silence. Then the same distorted voice from the CB, a raspy whisper that sent chills down his spine. You shouldn't have stopped. The voice was closer now, as if the owner was inside the truck with him. Panic clawed at Jack's throat. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the truck roaring through the night. The voice continued to taunt him, whispering threats, each word tinged with malice. It spoke of things Jack couldn't explain, things that chilled him to his core. It knew his name, his route, even details about his life he'd never shared with anyone. Just as abruptly as it started, the voice vanished, leaving Jack in a silence more terrifying than the whispers. He gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding against his ribs, every shadow seeming to hold a hidden threat. For hours he drove, the silence a suffocating presence. The sun began to rise, painting the eastern sky in hues of gold and crimson, and with it a sense of normalcy returned. Jack eventually reached his destination, his face pale, his hands still trembling. He reported the incident, but the authorities found nothing. No accident, no evidence of anyone else on that stretch of highway. The experience left Jack shaken. The memory of the distorted voice and the feeling of being watched forever etched in his mind. Chapter 3. The Empty Motel. Our final story brings us to the desolate outskirts of a forgotten town where a weary traveler named Sarah found herself at the mercy of an unseen caller in the eerie silence of an empty motel. The neon sign flickering erratically in the darkness cast an unsettling glow on the deserted parking lot. Sarah had been on the road for days, a cross-country trip that had taken an unexpected turn when a detour led her far off the beaten path. The old motel, despite its desolate appearance, seemed like a welcome refuge. The night manager, a gaunt man with unsettlingly vacant eyes, seemed unsurprised by her arrival. He handed her a key, the brass cold and heavy in her hand, and pointed her towards a room at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. The room was small and musty, the air thick with the scent of stale cigarettes and forgotten dreams. Sarah dropped her bag on the floor, the sound echoing in the unsettling silence of the motel. She felt a prickle of unease, a sensation of being watched that had nothing to do with the flickering neon sign outside her window. She tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to exhaustion, but as the night deepened, so did the sense of unease. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the buildings settling and the occasional distant sound of a dog barking, each noise making her jump. Then the phone rang. The shrill ring pierced the silence, making Sarah jump. She stared at the phone, its antiquated rotary dial seeming oddly menacing in the dim light. There was no one she knew who could be calling her here. Hesitantly, she picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence. The same unsettling silence that had greeted Anya and Jack. A silence that felt heavy, loaded with unspoken menace. Sarah hung up, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was probably a prank call, but the feeling of unease intensified. The calls continued throughout the night, each one shrouded in the same unnerving silence. They seemed to come at regular intervals, as if orchestrated by some unseen entity that knew her every move. With each ring, the weight of the isolation pressed down on Sarah, amplifying the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The silence between the calls became almost unbearable, her anxiety growing with every tick of the clock on the nightstand. Then, during one particularly harrowing call, she heard it. A voice, barely audible, whispering her name. Just her name, spoken with a chilling familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. Terror lent her a burst of adrenaline. She ripped the phone cord from the wall, as if severing a lifeline to something sinister. She spent the rest of the night huddled on the bed, fully clothed. Her eyes fixed on the door, every creak and groan of the building sending her heart into overdrive. As dawn approached, casting pale fingers of light into the room, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. And so, my friends, we come to the end of another journey into the shadows. These stories remind us that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we cannot see, but can only hear. Stay safe, and remember, not every call is worth answering. If you enjoyed these tales of terror and dare to venture further into the darkness, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more chilling encounters. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.